Welcome to our podcast. Today we have a fantastic guest, Greg Peterson. For over 3 decades, Greg has been a trailblazer in urban farming, creating one of Phoenix's earliest eco-friendly showcase homes with a quarter-acre edible garden, 80-plus fruit trees, innovative water systems, and a passion for sustainability. In 2003, he founded urbanfarm.org for urban farming education, and in 2015, Greg launched the Urban Farm podcast to share the joys of growing your own food and gardening stories. Recently, in 2022, Greg and his partner Heidi made a big move, purchasing 4 acres in Asheville, North Carolina, inspired by the vibrant local food scene. Join us as we discuss urban farming, sustainability, and Greg's exciting new chapter in Asheville.
Hey guys, welcome. And today we're talking with Greg Peterson from the Urban Farm in America. So Greg, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh my gosh. Well, it starts right after I was born. I was very interested in my 9, 10, 11 years on the planet. I was interested in figuring out how to grow my own food. And I started with fish aquariums, and I was growing fish in aquariums to eat at the age of 9 and 10 years old. I have no idea where that came from. And that kind of transitioned into a whole gardening thing itself. We moved into our Weldon, we called it the Weldon house, when I was 14 years old. And Mom said, Greg, see the right half of our backyard? That's your garden. Go start digging. So I actually planted my first garden at the age of 14. I planted my first fruit trees at the age of 15. And I'm 61 now, so I've been growing food for almost 50 years. And that really is driven by my need to share with people that the most important thing that we can be doing right now is figuring out where our food comes from, number one, and how to grow our own.
Yeah.
And so my journey for the past 50 years has been all about figuring that out.
Yeah. So what's the reason you think that growing our own food is the most important thing we can do right now?
We have, in the world, we have a very broken food system. It's a food system that delivers food just in time, which from one perspective, it's a miracle. In the States here, we have 330 million people, and essentially 330 million people get fed 3 times a day. And it's this system that delivers food to the grocery stores when it's fresh so that we have it. And it's very prone to breakdown. When COVID hit, the grocery store shelves emptied. We had a truckers' strike a few years ago. The grocery store shelves were empty. And storms, hurricanes, cyclones, when they come through, the grocery store shelves get empty. And that in itself is a problem. So that's one of the problems with our food system. The other problem with our food system is the manufacturing part.
Yeah.
The food that is manufactured. So they take food that grows, whether it be an animal or a plant, and they manufacture it into something else. And they add chemicals, and chemicals are used to grow them in a lot of cases. And so what we're feeding ourselves is food that is not really that good for us. And in some cases, it's actually causing diabetes and heart attacks. And, it's not a healthy food system.
Yeah.
All the way around.
Yeah, I was actually talking with a guy yesterday, a permaculture designer, regarding mulberries. We on the weekend, I took my kids to a permaculture introduction course. For kids, and it was amazing, and they learned so much out of it. And
oh my gosh, how cool is that?
Yeah, it was good. We did Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We didn't stick around Monday because we'd been actually on a holiday before that. The kids were pretty burnt out, and but one of the things that we were discussing was, I grew up in a country town, and mulberries was always our thing of trees, and there's a mulberry tree between here and my kids' school where we ride the bikes. It's always like mulberries on the way home, not the way to school. So we were talking about that mulberries. I'm thinking about how many people around the world have actually never eaten a mulberry, because a lot of people just don't randomly pick fruit off trees. I'm one of those people. I do.
You and me too. I do that too.
But because it's one of those fruits, like it's never been grown or designed to be transported. So unless you know someone with a mulberry tree or aware of it, you're probably someone that's never really experienced eating a mulberry.
Right.
Yeah, because most of the fruits, they are grown and picked and to be transported. So
yeah. Well, and that is another problem with our food system. They have to harvest the food before it's completely ripe. So it's not as nutrient dense as it should be. And then the moment they harvest the food, it starts losing that nutrient density that it does have. So by the time it arrives to us, it's ripened off the vine. It's high in something called lectins, and it's not nutrient dense enough for us. So harvesting food, I'll tell you what, if you grow a peach tree, you harvest the peach when it's at its peak of ripeness, and you eat that, you will never eat a store-bought peach again. It won't happen. Just because it tastes so good. It'll make your toes tingle.
No, totally. So tell us more about, I think when I did my house in Sydney, we had 600 square meters and we took it off grid, and we had 40 fruit trees, lots of stuff. And the biggest challenge we had with Sydney with being self-sufficient was for water, because we only got 700 mil a year. And it was sort of that compromise I took. It was like, well, either put a 50,000 litre water tank in to have water be self-sufficient for the whole year, or just buy from town water. But the challenge, for yourself, and I looked at what you've done over the years, like not only did you have, your urban block of land, you did it in the middle of the desert. So tell us more about that, about growing fruit trees and in the desert.
Yeah, so I actually have really refined growing fruit trees in hot climates over the past 40 plus years of growing fruit trees. And it came from killing a lot of fruit trees, not on purpose, but just, that's in permaculture, which I like to call the art and science of working with nature. Observation is the number one thing in my world. Yep. You observe, you pay attention to what's going on. So I got serious about growing fruit trees in the desert in 1989. Prior to that, I grew some, but it was more like a hobby. In 1989, it became a severe hobby to a business. And we had to get very clear about what it takes to have a water-hungry tree, like a fruit tree, survive in the desert. So I spent a lot of time and energy kind of walking my way through what does that look like, and what it looks like in the desert. And I've actually, so I don't know if your listeners know this yet, but we went 3,100 kilometers. We moved a year and a half ago, and moved from a place, the desert, to a place that gets a lot more rain. We get about 4 inches of rain a month, as opposed to about a half inch of rain a month in Phoenix. So that's I don't know the centimeters on that, but
so we would say 200 mil. And did you say an inch a month?
About 3.5 inch a month in the desert.
So it's about 25 mil. So so it's a lot less.
So, and the reason I shared that with you is in the background, in my background here, you can see, other background. There we go. In my background, you can see the swales that I put in. This is my backyard in Asheville, North Carolina, where we get 4 inches of rain a month. And those swales are catching water. So a swale, for those of you that don't know it, is an on-contour ditch. It's a ditch that runs across the landscape at the same elevation. So when it rains and the water runs downhill, it catches that water in the ditch. So I've done that. I've done that here, and I did that a lot in Phoenix. So I'm using the same techniques in the desert as I am here in a place that gets a lot more water. And that was one of the things in Phoenix that we did, was directing the water, directing it off of the roof, directing it through your landscape, putting in swales so that when it does rain, the water gets directed where you want it to. So that's the number one important thing, especially in the desert, is you've got water coming in, and I've taught water harvesting for decades. And people would always ask me, why bother harvesting water in the desert? You don't get that much. And it's like, yes, exactly. We don't get that much. We have to harvest it.
So what would some tricks, like Australia, we consider the desert here, we're a very dry country, and we're about to go into a very hot, dry summer.
Yeah.
So what's some tricks that you've learned over the years to, when there's not a lot of water around, to keep the fruit trees alive and to help them out and help them flourish?
So number one is how we actually plant the tree. So we dig a hole about 2 foot by 2 foot by about a foot deep. Sorry, my brain can't work that quick going to metric system.
They'll have Google, mate. They can work it out.
All right, perfect. And what we do is we take 40% of the native dirt in the hole and we put it in the wheelbarrow. And then we add 60% planting mix and compost. So healthy soil is combined of 5 components. Without all 5 components, you're not going to have healthy soil. And in the desert, and in fact, in my backyard where I planted these trees, it's mostly clay. And if you plant a tree in mostly clay and walk away, good luck.
Yeah.
So what we do is we add the other 4 components to that clay in the wheelbarrow. And how we do that is we take the 60% planting mix, the 40% native soil, clay, mix it up in the wheelbarrow. We add worm castings. Worm castings are gardener's gold. If you're into gardening, go get some worm castings. You know how important they are. They have soil life and nutrients in it. We add 2 pounds of worm castings. We add 2 pounds of azomite. Azomite is a rock dust mineral. It's like a vitamin pill for your tree. We had 2 pounds of organic fertilizer. And then we add 2 ounces of mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza is soil life. And we mix all of that up in the wheelbarrow. So what we've done is we've taken the dirt and we've added the other 4 components for healthy soil. And those other 4 components are airspace. So by digging the hole and fluffing it, we added airspace. Water. So with that airspace, the water can get in. Organic matter. And soil life. So that's the 5 components of healthy soil: dirt, airspace, water, organic matter, and everything that's alive in the soil. And we fluff it all up and then we plant it. And what we're doing there is we're giving that tree a limb up, an opportunity to get established in the space. And we always have people plant in the winter. So the tree gets established in the space before it gets really hot. Yeah. So that's the number one thing that we do, is plant the tree right. We've given it vitamin pills. We've given it fertilizer. We've given it soil life in that hole. The second thing that we do is what I call my 6-6 rule, which is a 6-foot diameter by 6-inch deep woody mulch basin. That's I think that's around 2 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah, around a 2 meter circular basin around the tree that's 6 inches deep, about that far.
Yeah.
And then what we do is we fill that with woody mulch. And this I discovered in the desert, and it works really well where we're at. Here is where we get 4 inches of rain a month. And that woody mulch, at the interface between the dirt and the woody mulch, it starts breaking down really fast to make really healthy soil. So essentially what we've done is we've dug our hole, we've supplemented the soil going into the hole, we covered the ground around the hole with woody mulch that's breaking down into healthy soil, just like it does in the forest. So that's step 1 and step 2. Step 3 is that we plant some kind of ground cover around the base of the tree, especially in the desert. It gets to 60 degrees C at ground level. It gets to 70 degrees C at the dirt level sometimes. That's not air temperature, but it gets that hot. That's enough to kill your trees. So by planting, we use cowpeas or sweet potatoes around the basins of the trees. That shades the ground, and that'll drop the temperature significantly, 30, 40 degrees in the summertime. So those are the big 3 things that we do. And you notice I haven't talked about water yet.
Yeah.
This is all stuff, except as one component of healthy soil. This is all stuff that we're doing before we're watering. And that woody mulch, the 6 inches of woody mulch, that holds the moisture in. And really, and then the ground cover across helps hold the moisture in. I used to get this question a lot, and there were a lot of permaculturists in the low desert in Phoenix and Tucson that would give me a hard time about planting fruit trees in the desert. And my contention has always been that, hey, we either have to ship this stuff in from someplace far away and there's an environmental impact of that, or we can grow it in our backyard and spend the water that we would, maybe spend on our landscape and put it on our trees. And I've taught gray water harvesting. That's taking water that goes down most of the drains of your house, just not your toilet or your kitchen sink, and using it in your landscape. That's completely legal in Arizona because of a guy named Brad Lancaster and the work that he's done over the past 25 years. So using gray water, and then just start exploring where you have water coming at around your house. One of the things that I discovered maybe 25 years ago is the condensation coming off of air conditioning. In a hot climate puts off gallons of water every day. Liters. I'll say that puts off liters of water every day. So harvest that water and use it. So you just get real creative.
Yeah, we had at our old office, the guy upstairs had aircon, and his drip pipes went down into the warehouse, and I just threw a indoor plant under it. It was great.
Right?
So
yeah,
solve the
exactly.
problem. Solve the drip on the floor, and we had a nice plant to look at. So
there you go. So that's really that's the basis for us managing fruit trees in the desert. And I have taken a lot of those systems and I've moved it here to my new home. I planted the trees the same way. I put the woody mulch basins around them the same way. So it all works, because really what we're trying to do is build really healthy soil for the trees. Just like it does in a forest.
That's it. So so with the grey water, so in Australia, like states, every council has different rules and regulations and things like that. So can you just literally, like, out of your washing machine in the States, grab your grey water and put it straight into your fruit trees?
You absolutely can.
And would you?
And that being said, you have to be careful what you're putting down the drain. You have to be really conscious about the soap that you're using if you're using it for gray water.
No, definitely. So would you recommend any sort of filtration system or
on the gray water? Oh, no. No. Filtration systems are problematic at best and tragic at worst. Because what happens in a filtration system in a tank for gray water is it becomes black water very quickly. And it's very hard on the system. The system breaks down. Then you have to figure it out. Use healthy soil. If you're building healthy soil around your trees, use that healthy soil to filter the water for you.
No, definitely. It's definitely this is actually quite a funny thing that we're looking at a job for a customer on a consultation of buying a business, and the business broker was like, "This guy's mad. He's talking about soil health and all this stuff done soil." Is like, it's not valuable.
Soil's not valuable.
Well, the business broker was like, "This guy's mad. He's a nutter talking about soil health. He has no idea." Like, and the seller was like, and he has. I went down. It's just really sandy. Like, it's right on the beach, and the soil's amazing. It's black, dark, rich soil, and
Wow.
I can see the value in that, and so can the seller. But the business broker is like, "What's he talking about? Like, who cares about the quality of the soil?" The business broker has no idea.
Yeah.
They're cared about, selling the business and the assets and the turnover and all that fun stuff. And
Yeah.
it's an old farm basically. And the guy still to this day has looked after the soil and cared and fed the soil. It's a thing that he's done. So yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Good.
So
Buy that farm.
We're working on it, mate. We're working on it.
All right.
So there's a few things holding us up here. January, February, we can move more forward to doing a deal on it. So I'm pretty excited about it. So yeah,
Exciting.
So it is. So yeah, no, it'll be a good project for my customers. So it's good to get into. So mate, tell us more about how So how often would you irrigate those plants in the desert, the fruit trees?
All right. Well, you said plants, and then you said fruit trees. So let's talk fruit trees, because my gardens get watered every day in the summertime.
Yep.
And fruit trees, what I discovered, remember I said I grew up in the same area for 54 years. My garden at the Weldon house, right half of the backyard, that's where you're going to find your garden at. Go start digging, Greg. And I planted my first fruit trees then in 1975. And we had this kind of crazy thing that happens in the desert. In Phoenix, it's called flood irrigation. And we would get 6 inches, that would be about 150 millimeters of water, once a month in the winter, twice a month in the summer, that would just flood into our yard. And it's a water right that came with the land, because in the early 1900s, the farmers put their land up as collateral to build a dam. Yep. And that water right has carried through. So I took that observation and watched how the fruit trees did. And the fruit trees thrived once a month in the winter, twice a month in the summer. And so that, whether you have flood irrigation in the valley or not, in the Phoenix area or not, the way that we coach people to water their trees is once a month in the winter, twice a month in the summer. So that's every 2 weeks or so, we're watering their fruit trees, and the trees thrive that way. Now, there's a couple of caveats. If we're going to have a really, really hot day, it's always a good idea to give them a little drink.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that only happens 2 or 3 times a season. The rest of the time, once a month in the winter, twice a month in the summer. And I get this question a lot. How much do I water? I can't tell you, because I don't know what your soil is.
Yeah.
You have to use a soil probe or a soil moisture meter, or watch your tree. But basically, the concept is, remember that 3-meter basin 2-meter basin I talked about putting around the base of the tree? Yep. You want to fill that with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 inches of water, with about 150 millimeters of water, and let it soak in. Yep. That is a good deep water.
Yeah. Interesting. So the flood waters, so they literally, so your property, they just open up the dam and the water just floods over through your property.
Yep. And so when I actually went to buy my house as an adult in 1989, that was the first thing on my list. I wanted flood irrigation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So literally your whole property just gets covered in water.
Yep. It's like a lake for a couple hours.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Here you go.
And so what I did starting about 25 or so years ago is I started teaching people how not to just grow grass in your yard, but how to grow an old growth food forest. Yeah. And that's from my permaculture training. And the house that I lived in was about, oh my gosh, I don't have the metric conversion, but about 13,000 square feet. That's a small lot for a city.
Yeah.
And I created, over the 32 years that I lived there, food to eat on the property every day. And I did that through fruit trees, and we had fruit on the property about 9 months a year. The time we didn't have fruit was during the hottest part of this year, which was August, September, October. But the other 9 months of the year, I had fruit that I could just go out and harvest.
Yeah.
I used open pollinated seeds on everything. So lettuce and parsley and basil and oregano and all my vegetables, I would just let them go to seed themselves and reseed themselves the next year. So there was always 15 or 20 different herbs or vegetables just growing on the property, just like it would in a forest.
Yeah. Tell us more about what a food forest means to you, and tell us more about your food forest. That would have been a bit of a challenge to walk away from and move away from.
It was a huge challenge to walk away from, and I'm working on that process. In the picture in the background here of me, I'm working on doing that again here. Basically, and when you look in permaculture, there's like 7 layers of a food forest, starting with the tallest trees down to the underneath the ground. And really, what a food forest is just, it's a place, and Bill Mollison talked about this in nauseam in his permaculture courses and content. It's just a place that grows wild food, and the food doesn't have to be wild in the sense that it was just there when you arrived, but you planted things there. So, carrots and basil and all kinds of things just reseed themselves year after year after year. And the reason we call it the urban farm where I moved from in Phoenix, an old growth food forest, is because it had, over the course of almost 30 years of growing in the yard, it had become a place that just naturally grows food.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, there was, at any given moment, there are 20 or 30 things to go out in the yard and harvest, whether it be sweet potatoes, which come back every year, or cow peas, or, you name it.
Yeah, definitely. So how old was that food forest you had there?
I lived there. I lived on the property for 32 years. So approaching 30 years old.
Yep.
And that was about the same time that I discovered permaculture. So for me, discovering permaculture in 1991, permaculture talks about regenerative, putting systems in place like nature. And I like to call permaculture the art and science of working with nature, working in the flow of nature. And so in 1991, I discovered permaculture. And for me, it was like, oh my God, that's the way I think. Thank you so much. And I just follow the concepts around permaculture and nature design to build out my food forest, whether I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, or Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. So tell us more about then. So what is it that, regardless of where you're at, that the tricks to building healthy soil? Because the more and more people I talk to over the years, and I've worked with even people that with animals, it's all about still making sure there's, a lot of grass-fed cattle here in Australia.
Yep.
And the really good guys are all talking about the soil health, and that's the most important thing to get good cattle from grass-fed. So, what's some suggestions of people of how to get really healthy soil? Because it seems like that's the most important thing.
That's the most important thing. Add lots and lots and lots of compost.
Yeah.
Add organic matter, add woody mulch. I have, oh my God, 100 cubic yards of woody mulch that has been delivered to my house. I've trained the tree services in my neighborhood that when they have a truckload of woody mulch, just dump it in my yard.
Yeah.
And there are piles of it out there. And that makes soil faster than anything. Now, you can't plant in it right away. If you put woody mulch down, you can't plant in it right away because it's a nitrogen sucker. It sucks the nitrogen out of the plants and soil. But over time, it'll take 18 months to 2 years for it to break down. But once that happens, you've got this absolutely amazing soil. And the other thing is the first thing that I did when I moved here a year and a half ago was I bought a worm bin. And a worm bin is a worm composting bin because I can't stand to throw out kitchen food scraps.
Yeah.
So the kitchen food scraps go in the worm bin and come out of the bottom 6 months later out of the worm bin. And, it's worm poop or worm castings. It's gardener's gold. It's one of the best things that we can be using in our garden.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. We use the bathtubs, and we just recently had a happy little accident at home.
love it when that happens.
Yeah, so a builder basically was putting a new bath in. We're getting a bathroom renovation done, and he chipped the bath putting it in. And what he found out is when he went to go replace the bath to get a new one, is that there was actually a huge failure with those baths. They were cracking and that sort of stuff. So it didn't end up in the bath, which was great. So we avoided that, and then we got a new worm farm to basically fill up with worms. And so we've collected 2 baths over the years. We've got two free baths, so we're about to do that with.
Nice.
So which is exciting. So yes, definitely. Have you ever been to the Greening the Desert project with Jeff Lawton or gone and seen that project?
I mean, I've seen videos and stuff online, but I haven't actually traveled there.
Yeah, so it's an amazing amazing site, and what they've done over there with the worm farms and just old bathtubs and we run a solar workshop over there years ago, and it was good. It was actually the biggest solar workshop we've ever run. We had about 60 students turn up.
Wow, nice.
I normally, when I'm in control of them, I like to keep them small. And when I got there and Jeff was like, oh, it's about 40, and there's about 60 people that turn up.
Nice.
So, but that's an amazing project, what they've done to build the quality of a site. What's the most amazing about a site if you look back, there's a really good video about that site of Greening the Desert, and it shows, like for me, what I look for now in that property. I actually don't look at that property. If you look around what they've done there, like all the houses around the property.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it's just all, barren land, and you see Jeff's property and Nadia's property really grows and really gets green, and then you start to see it spread, and all the neighbors have started, and that little village now, like from an aerial map now, you can see that it's just contagious and it's just growing through the village, and there's a lot more people copying and doing what he's doing, and they've seen it work. So it's a pretty amazing site, demonstration site there with, they've done really well with it.
One of the things that I did with my fruit tree program in Phoenix, so I run a fruit tree education program in Phoenix, and then people can get trees from me. Over the 24 years that I ran it in Phoenix, I would give fruit trees to anybody on my street.
Yep.
There were 22 houses on my street, and all of them over the years got fruit trees from me. I just gave them to them. And so with that intention in mind is to inspire people to do this for themselves. In fact, I had something really magical happen this week. Remember those worm castings we've been making? Yep. I took a handful of each one of those and I put them in the basins of these fruit tree. The lines that you see in the picture behind me are my swales where I planted fruit trees. And I took a handful of worm castings and threw it in each one of them. What I didn't realize was how many tomatoes that we eat and put in the compost bin. And so all of a sudden, we've got tomato plants coming up around all my elderberries and all my other fruit trees. And we are harvesting between 5 and 10 pounds of tomatoes every other day.
Yeah.
And so I actually put a table out in my driveway and put a note out on our street Facebook page and said, free tomatoes, come and get them. And they were gone in an hour and a half. There's about 25 houses down the street. They were gone in an hour and a half. And the excitement that it generated in people was palpable.
Yeah.
So.
Totally. So yeah, so with that there, that's one thing it's a theme of ours that we've been working on and looking at more about. So how do we create more with this sort of lifestyle and culture with community, get people together? Because one of the biggest things I'm that guy that talks to anyone. I'll knock on anyone's door. I used to do door-to-door sales, as a kid. It was one of my first jobs. So, I got no problems talking to random strangers, but I find it's a real culture shift, and people, a lot of property developments they're not engaged, not designed to people to engage in communities to be together. So how do we change and get people to interact more, and how do we use permaculture to make that happen?
It's really simple. And I have a question for you. When you have a party, where do people congregate?
Normally near the fridge.
Exactly. They congregate around the food.
Yeah.
Whether it's the fridge or the kitchen or the patio where all the food's laid out, that's where people congregate. And so I just do the same thing with farming and growing your own food. I have a plan. And the plan started before I arrived here, after we bought this property. And I have a really cool downstairs space that faces the road. And my thought was always, I'm going to have a farm stand there. So having a farm stand there this early, a year and a half in, was really excited. But food brings people together.
Yeah. Food
absolutely brings people together. And figuring that out, pretty soon, I'm going to be offering some classes for the people on the street on how to start a garden.
Yeah.
Because that's what I do. I'm an educator. And that'll excite people and get them motivated. So bring people together around food.
Yeah. No, totally. It definitely makes sense. And because I think in Australia here, we have a lot of rural communities. And one of the biggest things, they have the primary school in Australia is normally a primary school. It's a church. It's the town hall. It's drinks on Friday afternoons. And one big thing, because we do off-grid solar systems and we go to a lot of these remote areas. And it's one thing I still see in the really little, small communities, that every Friday afternoon, it's nibbles, couple of drinks at the local community hall. Yep. Everyone comes around, gets together, has a bit of catch up. And it's amazing to see. I dropped a solar system off to a customer a few months ago, and it was a Friday, and got involved in the experience. And it was a great thing to see. So and I think getting people together more. So it's definitely good.
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick. Let's see if I can do this. Come on, share screen. It's not going to let me do it. I was going to show you. Oh, if you go to my Facebook page, it's on my Facebook page. It's our first farm stand. You're going to have to find. Oh, you know what? I can share this. I could share this. That's just me talking about fruit trees. Those are all my fruit tree classes that I give. Share to a page. The Urban Farm page. Share now. I wonder if that did it. Go to the top.
Just refresh
it. Yeah, I know.
There we go.
There it is. Look at that. Oh my God. I love it when technology works. That's all we did. This is all I did.
Awesome.
And they were gone in an hour and a half. And I put it out right before the school kids bus arrived home. So I had the moms picking up their kids and driving them home. And one lady showed up with her 2 granddaughters, and her granddaughters are like 4 and 7. And I peeked over the fence and I waved at her, and she said, "I'm taking 2." Like, yes, go for it. So
Awesome.
my first farm stand here in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah, good stuff. Well done, mate. So, especially in an urban environment, I find that, the way we live our lifestyles these days, and we're busier than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
What's some recommendations you think for people at home if you live in an urban environment or a city, how do you implement permaculture into your life and make it a way of your life? How do we implement more of permaculture into people's lives in the urban environments?
First of all, take a permaculture design course. A permaculture design course is a prescribed 72-hour introduction to permaculture. It will change your life forever. And the way you find your permaculture design course to you is you put the name of your town and permaculture design course and see what comes up. So that's number one. And or take your kids to an introduction to permaculture. That is epic.
Yeah.
So start learning, and really it's how nature works. Start learning how nature works. Start observing nature to see how nature is working around you. That's the most important thing to do. I had this driveway in Phoenix that I needed to have shaded. And I tried for like 25 years to figure out how to get the dang thing shaded. It was an odd shape, the way everything worked, and it was hard to grow space. And I was walking in my neighborhood about 8 years ago, and I saw the same setup in somebody else's yard with the same kind of shade that I wanted to shade my driveway with. And it was like, wow, that's exactly what I need to do. And it was from observation. So that's the biggest thing you can do, is start observing to see what's working for other people in your neighborhood. So do a PDC and then start observing. That's permaculture design course. Then start observing what is actually working in your space. And I'm not just talking about your little piece of land. Expand it to your neighborhood, expand it to, 3 neighborhoods around you, and just start paying attention.
Yeah. No, definitely. You can, there's a lot to learn from neighbors. And even sometimes you see people that not even intentionally doing it, but yeah.
Exactly.
It's, my mother-in-law is she's like, that permaculture bloody crap. And she lives on a farm, and, she practices permaculture more than she'd be wanting to admit.
Right.
But it's interesting. So, but yeah, you do learn a lot from walking in the neighborhoods, and even myself, I've that's one thing I've actually started with a lot of our solar customers.
Mm-hmm.
I've been asking people that, okay, well, people get a couple of quotes from a couple of different people. I'm like, look, would you be willing to share the designs? I don't want to see the prices and money and that sort of stuff, but share the design so I can actually have a look at what other people are doing and offering. And I've learned some things, and I've sort of said to customers, look, if you like me and you don't like them, and they're offering something, like, just let me know about it, because there's something maybe I don't know that I can, and I have learned a few things from people's designs. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's one of the things as well with what we do, and when it comes to business, and I'll use solar as an example, but I know it's across a lot of industries. It's a very unhealthy competition, and I think if we have more healthier competition working together.
Let me say something about that. I believe, and I've developed this belief over the course of my life, that competition is what's killing the planet. Competition is using up resources. It's collaboration. And that's exactly what you're talking about. How do we collaborate and work together? I ran a project in Phoenix. I called it 10,000 Urban Farms in Phoenix. And people said, well, why did you pick 10,000? It's because, well, we did the math, and we actually need, if we were going to feed Phoenix with 4.7 million people, we'd actually need more like about 80,000 farms. But in my 10,000 Urban Farms project, people would say to me, Greg, what happens when people are competing? And my response to them was, well, when we're actually feeding 4.7 million people in the Phoenix metropolitan area, then there might be competition.
Yeah.
because we're in capitalism, and I'm a capitalist. I've run my own business for 47 years. I've had businesses. And what I found is that when we're working together, that's when we can make the biggest difference.
Yep.
Collaborate.
Yeah, I've got a thing. It's a bit cheesy, but the word team. If you break it down as an acronym, together everyone achieves more.
Right. Exactly.
So it's and it is. It's like It's funny. I refer so many jobs to other solar companies, and most of the time I just don't want to do the job.
Yeah.
Because I do like. I actually prefer more interesting jobs and things to do. And if it's just a run of the mill, simple, put some panels on the roof, I'm like, I don't know about it. Talk to these guys. It's not that it's a bad job. It's just like, it's not interesting to me. I actually do really like the complicated jobs, road design. It's a bit of a challenge too. I'm like, right, let me in it, but where a lot of other solar guys are like, nah, it's all way too hard, they just want the McDonald's style approach. So, but it's definitely like if we could, one of the things I sort of think, if we could feed 4.5 million people from a load of farms, like, we actually need competition because everyone be eating for free technically.
Right. Exactly.
So
exactly.
That's definitely so.
So my goal in moving here, just let me kind of riff off that a little bit. My goal in moving here was to see how much of our own food that we could eat.
Yeah.
So we could grow and eat. And in the past week, we've eaten potatoes, tomatoes, basil, 3 different kinds of greens, and onions. And that is out of my first garden last year was pretty much a failure. My friend Zach Brooks from Arizona Worm Farm reminded me, Greg, because I hadn't had a first garden since the 1970s. He said, Greg, remember, your first garden is your worst garden. So last year's garden, we were on a scale of 1 to 10, we were about a 1. This year, we've gotten it to about a 4 because we're improving the soil. And, so that's pretty dang good. I'm going to go eat some soup here in a little while that has potatoes in it that we grew and onions. It's like, how cool is that?
Yeah, no, definitely. So how big was your last property compared to this one?
Oh my gosh. So I actually think I can answer that in your terms. 12,000 or 1,200 square meters in Phoenix.
Yep.
And 40 through 50, 200. 18,000, is that right? Yep, 18,000, about 19,000 square meters here.
Yeah, right. So definitely it's almost, yeah.
And the picture you're seeing in back of me is about 20% of my property.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah, that's my urban block was 600 square meters. So yeah, we had 40 fruit trees at its peak is what we had on that little property. So
nice.
And the house itself was a 200 square meter footprint. So it's a bit of a challenge. So and one of the biggest problems we had with our usability of our land was it was a 2-story house. So you lose so much of that land to shading in winter.
Yep.
That was one of the big challenges. Like one of my vegetable guys, I was actually watching an old video the other day, and I was like, we grew stuff when the sun got there at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it left at like 4 in winter.
Right.
We didn't have much growing space, but yeah. So that's one thing we talk about is So one of the things for me that I really got into with that challenge there, trying to do so much on such a small block of land, was aquaponics.
Oh yeah.
And so I got myself an aquaponics unit, and that used to be so productive. And we've actually, our current property we're in at the moment, we've first we always do a herb garden and get the aquaponics going and a few other things, but we really haven't got that productive system here with everything. But the aquaponics is really, really productive. You've had some experience with aquaponics in the past.
I have. In fact,
about that.
Remember I said when I was 9 or 10 years old, I was growing fish in a fish aquarium to eat?
Yep.
Yeah. So that transformed. So I used to hang out at a local fish store when I was 14 and 15 years old. I would just go after school. I would drive to the fish store. I worked, I just hung out there. And if people needed fish bagged, I bagged fish and like that. And Bill, the guy that worked there, was a friend of mine. He was, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years older than I am, than I was at the time. And one day he said, Greg, how would you like to help me clean a fish pond on Sunday? 15 years old, muck out a fish pond. I am in. Let's do this. He paid me, I think he paid me $10 for the day. And when we got done, he said, I don't want to do this anymore. How about if you take it over? So at age of 15, I'd already had a paper route and was delivering papers in the 70s. And I was bagging groceries at the local grocery store at the age of 15. And then at the age of 15, I also became a business owner. So I had to figure that out. My dad was a financial planner. So, he helped me with the finances of it all and everything. And what that quickly morphed into within 2 or 3 years was me building small scale aquaculture systems for people in their backyard. Swimming pools. I converted swimming pools to aquaculture ponds. And I actually built Doughboy. Those are the above ground pools. I turned them into fish ponds for people to grow food. So from the time I was about 16 years old to the time I was 24, I was actually building those kinds of systems for people. Now, the aquaponics part, it was back then in the late 70s and early 80s. It was at the very beginnings of the aquaponics. And basically what aquaponics is they take the fish water and water the gardens. And the roots from the plants clean the water and puts the water back into the pond. So it's that circular system. And since then, so I did that in the 70s and 80s. And since then, I've had a couple of aquaculture ponds that I've done that with. And there's a guy out of Phoenix called Ed. Can't remember, I'm drawing a blank on his last name. Sorry, Ed. In the moment, my brain's not working. And he's got something called a Lear garden, Lear. And he has turned aquaponics into a soil making machine. And so go check out his website. I'll have his URL here in a minute. Lear Gardens. All right, well, I'm going to have to come up with it. But basically what he's doing is he's got a fish pond underneath a raised bed garden. And the fish pond pumps the water into the raised bed garden. And they put compost in the raised bed garden. It filters the water, puts it back. It's an advanced aquaponics system. And it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely making soil. So, would you consider aquaponics to be a lot more productive than a traditional, say, wicking bed or a raised garden bed?
I don't know if they're necessarily a lot more productive, but they are productive.
Yeah.
And it really depends on what's your gig. What do you want to play with? What do you want to do? I happen to like planting orchards. There it is right there. And planting fruit trees. The reason I love planting a fruit tree is because you plant it once and it makes fruit for decades or hundreds of years. I had a couple of citrus trees in the backyard at the urban farm in Phoenix that were 100 years old.
Yeah.
So it's really, what's your gig? The other thing I love to do is, I don't know if you've heard of them, tower gardens. They're hydroponic tower gardens. Absolutely love them.
Yeah, a lot of the in Australia, my wife's she went to school with a girl who her parents owned Ricardo's tomatoes, which is pretty famous in Australia here. Amazing tomato, and that's how they do their strawberries and tomatoes, is with the towers. So yeah, so
cool.
It's
it's lehrgarden.com, and Ed's last name is Williams. I'm putting the URL in the chat for you so you can share it with your people. That's what he's up to is cultural changing, and it's highly productive, and it takes some work. It's like, what are you into? I happen to be into tower gardens and fruit trees. He happens to be into aquaponics and Lear gardens. So
interesting. No, we'll
yeah.
definitely have to check that out and learn more about it. So yeah, because for me, with the property we're in right now is a lot of hard spaces. It's actually interesting that we actually have 1,700 square meters of paddock next to us, which is actually not ours. So we live in the middle of, my house is actually in the middle of 7 acres in the middle of town.
Oh, nice. Oh, wow.
You think that we're completely in the middle of the bush. The hospital is less than 300 meters from my house. But yeah, you think you're in the bush. It's really private. It's really quiet. But we actually own 600 square meters, and the 600 square meters we own is literally all rock, and I don't think we actually own any dirt or soil.
Yeah.
So aquaponics and that sort of stuff that we've done here, it's in raised garden beds or the vertical towers. Even on the permaculture course on the weekend, I remember when we did our first property in Sydney, because we did have a fence, and the fence got sun all the time. It was the only thing that got sun all day, was the back fence. And we did a lot of milk cartons recycled, and we put them on the fence. And I totally forgot that's what we used to do until we did the permaculture course on the weekend with the kids. And that's what they did. They made old milk cartons, and the kids put tomatoes in them. We brought them home.
Yep.
I was like, that's what we could do with that fence over there. And it's something that, we can take with us if we need to. And yeah, so.
Oh my gosh, I'm looking out the window here, and my sweetheart Heidi is carrying a basket of tomatoes that she just harvested, and it's got to be, if I weigh it, it'll be 5 or 6 pounds of tomatoes. And we do that every other day.
Definitely.
And they're just growing wild in our yard. That is the ultimate food forest right there.
Yeah, no, tomatoes is one of the things for me that's one of my favorite things to grow. When we're in Sydney, our property in Sydney, we had I did a project for a school, and someone got the numbers wrong. We ended up like 100 cherry tomato trees over the project, tried giving them away, and ended up with a load. And we ended up just planting them around the house. And it did terrible the first year.
Yeah,
mate. The second and third year after that, like, you just could not get rid of them. It was just like sweets walking around the backyard. It was great. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome.
Nice.
Well, Greg, thank you. I really appreciate, mate, your time and your knowledge and education. Is there anything else you'd like to add with our viewers?
A couple things. I wrote this in 1996, and I'm going to leave people with this to think about. Our downfall as a species is that we're arrogant enough to think we can control Mother Nature, and stupid enough to think it's our job. So work with nature as much as you can. And we talked about healthy soil. I have a landing page with some videos on it called healthysoilhacked.com. If anybody's interested in learning about building soil, sheet mulching, I learned sheet mulching in my permaculture design course, healthysoilhacked.com.
Awesome. We'll put all those links in the description below so you can check them out. So
awesome. Thank you.
Mate, thank you. And until next time. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found the content educational and inspiring. If you got something out of it and you think you know someone else that would actually also enjoy it, we'd really appreciate if you could share the link with them and encourage them to check out our channel. And don't forget, you can join the Off-Grid Tribe podcast for free, where you can actually ask and interact with myself and also our guest speakers. So jump over today to offgridtribe.com, register yourself an account where you can actually have a conversation with myself and one of our guest speakers, and we can continue the conversation there. Together, let's embrace the power of sustainable living.